Okay, let's get started. Our first presentation of the day is a panel called End-to-End Collaboration, Delivering Your Next New Industrial Facility. Again, end-to-end collaboration, delivering your next new industrial facility. So I want you to help me welcome to the stage Elizabeth Mangan, CEO of Miller Valentine, and joining her are her panelists, Dave Dickerson, Brian Taylor, Ken Givens, Nate Green, and Daniel Lessing, also Yannick Schilling, I believe. So come ahead, folks, and as they get seated, I'll remind you that February 12th, 1809, does anybody remember what happened on February the 12th of 1809? Who? What? Abraham Lincoln was born in Hodgensville, Kentucky. And one of the sayings made me think of the contractor and owner community. Here's what he said. No matter how cats fight and hate each other, there always seem to be a lot of kittens around.
Put out there.
And so remembering Abraham Lincoln on this great day and remembering what he said, it reminds us a lot of conflict with owners and contractors, but we eventually get the job done. And so I'm very happy to welcome my friend Elizabeth to the stage, and let's give it up for Miller Valentine and her panel, shall we? Thank you.
I'm clapping for us. There we go.
Thank you, Greg, and thanks everybody for being here. Good morning. I know it's the last day and the first session, so we're excited you're here and we appreciate it. So they asked me to facilitate this panel, and I had a little chuckle because I've never been asked to facilitate anything, and I assume it's because I actually talk too much. And then they told me who was on the panel, and I realized, oh, I've met my match. So I'm going to facilitate or wrangle this panel, and it's right?
Yeah, we'll do the best we can.
Yeah,
I know you will. I know you
Give it
will.
our best shot.
In all seriousness, I think we're going to have a great, robust discussion today. We're really going to focus on the benefits of integrated end-to-end project delivery, right? Why it's so important to have all team members of your project involved at the outset, and that really drives benefits for the project, but not just the project, also for the overall operational efficiency and life cycle of your facility. So that is where we're going to focus. Could I get, where's the clicker, actually? Is this it?
That's a clicker.
Or we're going to find out what happens.
Let's see.
Advance it once. No?
There we go.
Look at that.
All right.
Could I get a show of hands? How many owners do we have in the crowd today? All right, we've got a few, great. So this little point, I think, is for you all. You're fully aware. We're not going to talk about the business case today, but everything we're going to talk about this morning, the clear business case underlines everything we say, right? So you can have the most integrated, collaborative team. Everything has to be driven from a clear business case. Your business case should drive the focus of every team member's delivery. You want to make sure they're delivering value at every phase of the project, and that's critical. They need to be aware of the business case and understand it fully. The best team knows we're not building buildings, right? We're building the space and the place where you make your product, you provide your service, and you build your business. So we're not going to talk about that today, but it underlines everything we're going to talk about. So let's introduce our experts. I am hoping that they are going to share their proven strategies for how they navigate end-to-end delivery and produce great projects, but also how they focus team members around operational efficiencies and facilities life cycles for the long term. Would you all each take a moment and introduce yourself, please?
You want to go, Yannick? You're at the end.
Should I start? Well, good morning, everyone. How is everybody doing? Well, it's a pleasure for me to be here with all those professionals today. I'm very passionate about the world of Industry 4.0 and the world of factories, buildings of the future, factories of the future, distribution centers of the future. Spent my career in the industrial world. You will hear I have an accent. I'm a French person, but I have spent 15 years in Germany, 5 years in China, and 10 years plus in the United States, always in factories and always building factories. And I'm one of the persons who believe that your building is your greatest asset for operational excellence and to be a magnet for talent and attracting and retaining people. So I'm excited to be on the panel today, and thanks for the invitation. Looking forward to the discussion.
Great, thank you. Dan.
Daniel Lessing with BHDP Architecture, leading our industrial market, working with a lot of the folks that are in the room on helping create kind of the future of manufacturing. And prior to my 5 years at BHDP, I was with Toyota for 17 years in their construction group, building a lot of Toyota's buildings all over North America.
Awesome.
Great. Nate?
My name is Nate Green with the Montrose Group. We are a corporate site location, economic development, and government relations consulting firm based in Columbus, Ohio. I have been doing economic development for 25 years. I know I don't look. I look very youthful.
Sure.
Yeah. Doesn't that sound good? Yeah. No, but I've been doing this for 25 years. I'm probably, it's interesting as I look around and with my panelists, in a lot of ways, I'm the oddball, right? But you're all in construction. You are all in architecture, engineering, all those kind of things. I'm not. I live in the world of site location, workforce development, economic development incentives, those kind of things. But as we're going to talk about today, and I think, it's a credit to the Miller Valentine team that I'm on the panel because what we do is so essential to getting a project off the ground and making sure it actually happens and is a good thing.
Great. Kenneth?
Good morning, everybody. Kenneth Givens. I'm a senior project manager for Miller Valentine Construction. For the better part of the last decade, I have been working primarily on collaborative lean IPD projects, delivering industrial construction, manufacturing facilities for clients, and look forward to talking today about how collaboration is the key to success on those projects. So.
Great. Thank you very much. So as we know, traditional project teams are somewhat siloed, right? So if you're an owner and you're thinking about developing a new facility, you probably start with your site selection, right? You want to make sure you get the right location, exactly the right site within that location. And once you've zeroed in on a site, you ultimately start thinking about engaging your architect. Let's start on site layout, some building design, and you get down the path on design and you think, it's time to hire a contractor, right? We've got to have somebody to build this facility. And ultimately, you're dealing with your equipment manufacturer and installer to make sure you're getting the right equipment in the right place in the facility. The integrated team we talk about today is not meant to break down those silos. In fact, every single one of those functions is critical to what you do. The integrated team is really about connecting those silos and making sure you have that connection so that you can drive value through aligned project goals and, quite frankly, getting to early certainty around project outcomes. So if we focus for a minute on the site selection function, Nate, could you spend a few minutes talking about critical factors around site selection, but then I'd also like to hear how can the other team members be engaged to not only mitigate challenges as it relates to site selection, but ultimately enhance outcomes?
Yeah, absolutely. So we in site location, site selection, we talk often about team, right? You've got to have a team. And the reason for that is, I talked about my background. We can't do all the things, right? I'm not a real estate person. As I said, I'm not an engineer. I'm not an architect. We can't do all the things, and it takes a team to really make all those things happen. You have the key factors in site selection. These are in varying orders, but I'm just going to talk about the site selection process from a corporate site location perspective. It is a step-by-step process. It's something that we take our clients through that goes from really, we start out with getting the team members together and talking through what the project is, what their needs are, and really the goal of that facility, right? Did they merge with somebody and they need to build a new facility to bring operations close together? Do they lease in a space that the lease is going up and they're going to go to another building? Do they just have growth and they need to do a building? But one of the things that we always talk about, and it's true with our corporate site location clients and with our industrial developers, is that we want the rest of the team to be engaged with us in the early going. And the reason for that is because of the things that happen, the mistakes that happen later on when we didn't have the team members involved. Kenneth and I were just talking about Civil engineers. Ken's a civil engineer. I deal with civil engineers all the time, right? They are my best friends in projects. And we tell our clients, if you have a project that needs sewer and water, that needs roadway, whatever it is, you need to have that civil engineer come on day one and help us to build out the case for the site selection projects. It's the same with the construction team. It's the same with the architects. All of those things, because what happens a lot to us is as we go through a process, and maybe we've got to get something rezoned, right? We go through the process, we got to go through rezoning, and the civil engineer wasn't there, and I can't answer the question about sewer and water. That's dead on arrival. We're not going to get it rezoned. But if I've got the civil engineer there, and we can make the case for the need for that sewer and water and that zoning, it just makes things easier. So these are I'll call them the process. Those are the key factors when we look at corporate site location. The interesting part, and I should have changed this, but today, and we're going to talk about a lot about this, and Yannick, you mentioned it. The number one thing that users, that companies, and those of you in the room that are here, the number one thing that companies are dealing with is workforce. We all know it. Whether you're a company or whether you're a contractor or an engineer or an architect, we all know it, right? We know that workforce is a problem. It's not getting any better. We have one of the lowest labor participation rates in the United States than we've had in decades. And that's because there's people, COVID caused that. There's people that just never return to the workforce. There's people that are doing other things that they don't want to return to the workforce. So workforce availability, oftentimes, in site selection is one of the number one things. And Yannick's going to talk about it, and so is Dan when talking about the building and what it means. But that is important. It's one of the things that when we start a site location project, that we focus in on, because if we're going to look at 10 sites around the region or around the country, whatever it is, figuring out whether the labor is actually there and there's an excess labor and there's housing for those people, that's going to be a big deal. I'm in Columbus, Ohio, and there was a big announcement for a company called Anduril a couple weeks ago, maybe a month ago. They're going to have 4,000 people in their facility. Their number one issue was workforce. And so now, Columbus itself is growing and has added over 500,000 people in the last 15 years, the Columbus MSA. So there's a lot of people that's there, but that's the big issue. All these other things that are here, transportation is always a big deal. And that's where we bring in our partners. Proximities to customers and supply chain, that's something we don't necessarily deal with, but it's something that we need to make sure they understand, and if we need to do a supply chain analysis, we can do that. Power and utilities, again, that's where all of my friends here in the panel come in, because I don't know anything about power and utilities. I can make stuff up and I act like I know what I'm talking about, but I really don't. Market analysis is a big part of what we do, because the market analysis is going to be that labor that we talked about and how the big workforce. It also is going to be from a supply chain perspective. What is there? What is in each market? And does that make sense for you to be there? Are there other companies around that are in the industrial park that are like you that you can pull people from? It's a big deal, and that's what we do with our market analysis. I talked about zoning before. Zoning is also a big part. If we're looking at a site and they're going to build new, we got to make sure that if it's already rezoned, that's awesome. But if it's already zoned, can we actually put that user there? Are we looking at something that's a data center? And data centers are not in zoning codes. We've had such a boom in data centers in the last 5 years that a lot of zoning codes are so antiquated. Even in big cities, they don't include data centers. So we need to make sure that from a legal perspective that works. So that's a big part of what we do. Local economic and community impact. We always run an economic impact analysis that helps tell the story of why this community should have that project. It also, those are, and they're not here, but those are other partners that we always bring in, because we have to make sure that if we're doing a site location project, they want the project, not just our client and not just me. And then the reason that incentives is the last thing on there is because economic development incentives are the icing on the cake, but they're not the cake. In economic development, we spend a lot of time talking about economic development incentives. This morning I was putting together something in my hotel room about economic development incentives for a community. But that is, if a company chooses a location because of the incentives, it's the wrong location a lot of times. And that shouldn't drive the decision. So we actually, when we go through the process, all these other things that are on the list, we get through first, and then we talk about incentives, because that's the last piece. And it may make or break the project, but it shouldn't be done up front, and we shouldn't make decisions based on that. Because you guys all know, like, it could be a very poor site with the largest amount of incentives, which usually happens. If you're getting
That's
$10
why
million,
you get all the
right,
incentives.
yeah, right. But you guys are all like, yeah, there's no way we're going to go there. We can't even put it up.
So Nate, if labor is the number one driver, right, and the availability of labor to not only build it, but to actually operate the facility going forward, if that's the number one driver for site selection, what can the other partners do, right? If they're at the table at the outset, what can you bake into the facility? Can automation be a factor to help maximize the labor you do have? What can the other partners bring to the table to try to mitigate the labor challenge at the outset? And maybe
Absolutely. I'd love to hear their thoughts.
Yeah, I think, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, but there's a lot of folks that talk about being employer choice, right? And employer choice means lots of things. It means good incentives, good benefits, good name recognition, not having a bad reputation in town for tearing up people and destroying them. But then also, we'll talk about how Gen Z, Gen Alpha aren't really looking at manufacturing as an opportunity, right? So there's a lot of things you can do on your property as well as in the community. Getting those folks that are in high school, getting those folks that are maybe interested in like a 2-year tech degree that flows very well into a manufacturing type setting, and getting plugged in those places as we talk about that community impact. That's because a lot of the times when you're doing the site selection, part of it's, okay, what tech schools do you guys have in town? Yep. Right? We're not really interested in the 4-year degree folks, but we need electricians, we need technicians. A lot of those folks have a 2-year degree, or we can pay for you to get a 2-year degree and then roll into our facility. So that's all part of that site selection. And the one other thing I'll mention that I've noticed from a lack of having the rest of the partners in the room when the site selection is happening is things where you have a company having really no idea how much electrical load they need and just saying some crazy high number because they want to be fully never happens.
Like they need, I need 500 megawatts like right now.
Immediately. Because on day one, we're going to need 500 megawatts.
Day one.
Ignore the fact that the building's not even built for another year or two. Right. And then the public utility goes, well, you can't get 500 megawatt. There's 18 other people that want 500 megawatt. You're going to be 2 years out. And then that site gets axed. Yep. Versus having a realistic conversation about what actual electrical needs you need on day one versus year 10. The other thing that we run into is when site selection doesn't involve the civil engineers, the architects, and they have someone that maybe put together a idea about where the wetlands were, but they haven't identified them. Yeah. Or like, hey, we're gonna go find 100 acres, because then we're gonna want to build a 1 million square foot building. I'm gonna go, well, with this zoning and these setback requirements and that wetland that's on the entire east side of the property, like you're only fitting a 300,
and we were talking about it last time. I mean, if you got a wetland and you have to go through the Army Corps, that is something that the civil engineers can be like, that's an issue and it's gonna take us 2 years to get done, right? And if we don't have those members on the team up front, we're gonna miss that.
So I've literally told clients before, like, your 1 million square foot building's now 400,000 square foot. Yeah. Like, and they're freaked out. Like, we've already paid for the property. I'm like, well, you should have called me a month ago. Yeah. It's like, sorry. So that really, their whole 10-year strategy, their 15-year strategy is like, there's a giant issue there, because they're like, well, we thought we were going to be able to get up to this amount of square footage, and it's going to be really hard.
25% of the site. Yeah. That's a problem.
So would there be other changes you might make to the facility to mitigate the labor challenge? So Yannick, I was thinking specifically about, the factory of the future, right? And what would you do differently if you're gonna have a labor challenge regardless of where you locate, right? So being at the table early on, what value would you be able to provide in site selection?
Mm-hmm. Well, we always work with owners on their strategies and footprints and building their factories, and we have two types of customers. The one who are building buildings all the time and they know pretty well how all of that matters, and others which are maybe first-time builders, or they have their legacy headquarter factory, but now for the first time they are building something new somewhere else. So there was a lot of education to do on what are the best practices, what can go wrong, and where to pay attention. And what I like to say is, when you select a site or when you build a factory, you have one shot to get it right, because you are making an investment for life. Yeah, it's not an investment what you will reconsider in 10 years. You are building for long, so have the right place. One of my first projects when I arrived in the United States, I had the pleasure to work with such an integrated team, finding a site for the company I was with back then, Festo, a German automation champion. And we did a really solid due diligence on finding the right spot in the United States, because for 40 years we've been on Long Island, New York, which could be questioned in terms of site selection for an industrial factory. Back in the day, to develop a commercial entity was fine, but 40 years later, to expand your manufacturing and supply chain footprint, it was definitely not the right location. So I think Nate made a good list on all the factors which matter, and people and talent are really the centerpiece. But there are other factors to consider. Where is your market, and how do you gain proximity to the market, access to infrastructure, and just what will be the best location to stay for so many years in the future. The other thing I would like to add is, yes, having a comprehensive strategy and vision for what will happen on that site, on that campus, how will that evolve. Not thinking short term. Often we have the discussions like, well, if you buy 20 acres, maybe you will run out of capacity if you need to expand. So having that long-term vision, having a clear master plan for the campus, what will be phase 1, phase 2, and all of that. And yes, cannot underline enough the importance of that initial due diligence for long-term success. The worst thing what can happen when you are leading an industrial company and you need to focus on your customers, on delivery times, on cost, on competitiveness, is you don't want to be bothered by, shoot, we chose the wrong site, or we did not build the right building. So make those things first time right. Planning is critical. Cost of the lifelong utilization of that asset will be fixed early on in the beginning phase. And I cannot underline enough that working with the experts, you can be a smart company, but you never have all the expertise. So bring the right team together, and you will do a lot of good for your company for the many years to come.
And I think your point too about bringing the experts in, because you don't have them in your company often, right? Maybe if you're a large company, you do, but more often than not, you don't. And you have a real estate person or an HR person or whatever it is that only knows that piece, and you have to bring all the experts in to really get everything. I did want to say, one of the things that you mentioned, and Yannick, you actually talked about it too, or you guys both talked around it without saying it. One of the things in site selection that's changed over the last 20 years that I've been doing this is quality of life. Dan, I think you said it about, you want to be at a place, you want to be in a community that has amenities. You want to be at a place where people want to work. Quality of life for your workers is much bigger. It's not in the top, it's not the number 3 or 4 thing. It used to be, when you look at the site selection factors, it wasn't even the top 10, right? We always talked about quality of life in our communities, but it didn't matter. Now though, companies are looking for, what does the campus look like? What does the surrounding community look like? Is there enough housing for the people that I need to hire to live in? Those are important factors, and they're things to look at now that weren't necessarily, they were always important, but they weren't as important as they are today.
I want to add one thing to that, because this is absolutely a critical point. We mentioned that talent is so important.
Yeah.
We have seen slides this week about talent gap, skills gap, and all of that. So there is a fierce competition for talent.
Absolutely.
And you are so right. Ultimately, you will choose your site for, you need a magnet for talents. And I think some of us share some clients who have done such an excellent job. They have no discussion about work from home. Mm-hmm. They have built a campus, which you would at times see with the big tech companies in California. It's a place where people want to work, where they want to come every day, where they bring their families, where they will have access to things you can only dream about, and they don't want to leave. And their retention rates are so high, their attrition is so low, and this offers wonderful conditions to do business. Then you can focus on what you're really here for.
Right. That's great. Well, thank you all. You said most of our users and owners don't have the in-house experts, right? Which is why it's so important to assemble those experts. We talked about the integrated team is about connecting those silos, but to do that, you also have to respect each discrete function, right? So could you say a little bit, Dan, maybe talk to me a little bit about team assembly?
Yeah, I think, regardless of how you want to procure your project, there's a lot of different methods out there. Miller Valentine and BHDP both do IPD projects for Procter & Gamble. But whether it's design build, CM at risk, regardless, even if you're doing design bid build, which hopefully folks are steering away from that as much as you can anymore, you got to have everyone in the room from the very onset. And it used to be where folks say everybody, they meant like, okay, the owner, the architect, and the contractor. Okay, who's the owner? Well, it's the project manager person that you hired from some third-party project manager, and there's no one actually from the owner in the room during the kickoff because you don't have the expert in-house.
That's right.
You hired someone to do it. So you have this kickoff meeting, and you start talking about what are the missions of the owner, what's the objectives of the owner, and all that person knows is, okay, we're going to build it for $100 and it's got to be done in 12 months. Okay, well, but what about everything else? Like, what are the operational goals? Like, what are the sustainability goals? Is HR struggling hiring people into this facility? Like, when they do exit interviews, what do you hear? And then that third-party project manager goes, I don't know, I'm just responsible for budget and schedule. And you need to hit the number and go. So what we talk about in integrated project delivery, it's not just the OAC, right? That owner has a much larger group of folks that should be in the room in those kickoff meetings. And I've literally, when we've talked about sustainability, we have a sustainability conversation on every single one of our projects. It's a requirement, regardless if the owner wants to do it or not. And then there may be that third-party project manager. He goes, well, we don't have budget for sustainability. Like, we're not going to go do a lead project. We're not going to go do blah blah blah. And I'll pull out like the corporate ESG and say, like, it says 100% of your guys' projects are lead. Like, this is above your pay grade. Like, let me talk to someone that's more important. So it's like those conversations are happening all the time because the right folks are not in the room from the very beginning. And then we talk about it on the contractor side. A lot of times it's a pre-con person. The estimator's there. It's not the project manager. It's not the superintendent. It's not all the trades. Like, where's the leads for all the trades? So it's like the true integrated project, like anyone that's impacted by the building, has a decision point in the building, is building the building, not just the pre-con guy. Like, they should all be in the room when that project kicks off, and we all collectively agree on what the mission and the goals are for the project, and that sets it up for success, right? Because you don't want to be there a couple years later and go, we really cut a couple corners, and this building has XYZ problems, and now you have to deal with that for the next 30 years, the life of the project, right? Versus if we got it right on the front end, got all the voices in the room, and then built something that was right for everyone.
Well, it's always more expensive later. Yeah,
100%.
To get it first time right, you save money.
Yeah, I mean, from a construction side, right, when we're trying to build those teams, the primary focus, right, is making sure that the right people are in the room on the front end, especially from the owner side. A lot of times that's the miss. You'll get all the construction folks in the room, the people that are going to be putting the project together. You'll get their input on schedule, cost. You'll align to some certainty on the front end. You'll go back to the owner. Then they come back with 10 other things that they wanted that no one ever shared with you, right? So it's not just on the construction side and design side, to your point, Dan. It's very important to get the owner and the right folks from the owner side in the room so that they can provide, all that end user input, right? Like Yannick was talking about earlier, it's what are they going to be doing with this building 5 years from now, 10 years from now? Is there room for expansion? Are you planning with that in mind? It doesn't cost us anything on the front end to plan for that type of stuff, right? Small pennies in the barrel. So why not plan for that now so that you have the opportunity and ability to do those things in the future? Also, when we're assembling the team, focusing on qualifications first, not just low bidder, right, is super, super important. Low bidder a lot of times gets you poor quality fast or good quality slow, and it doesn't buy you a whole lot in between, right? So the goal is to try and get you the right project delivered in the time frame that it takes to get the right project delivered. So getting those folks in the room, aligning to that cost and schedule on the front end, not going with low bidder is very, very important in the overall cost of the project. Again, looking at it from a holistic view, like Yannick was saying, instead of just looking short term and saying, okay, this project's gonna be $100, you know, per square foot.
I think with that integrated team, you can really do a good job when you have the owners and their teams knowing this is the volume we will have of material transiting that factory. That's the number of people we'll have on site. That's the kind of automation. This is the layout we have in mind. Then you can really, in a joint effort, design the best building for your operation and not the other way around. Yeah? As well, when you look at your initial investment for your site, for your building, the owners have already very early on an idea of, because they made a business case about this will be our operating costs. And they know about their goals, about sustainability, those are our ESG goals, those are our operating goals. So all of that is already on the table. And together you can develop the best equation for what's our initial CapEx and what is our long-term OpEx. Because I like to say CapEx beats OpEx all the time. Why? Workforce is scarce and it will not get better. So automation helps you in the long run. You will need less people and you can focus on better qualifications to run your integrated automated system rather than saving $1 million up front. I like to call them the false enemies. Yeah, I've been in many discussions where there is a smart CFO saying, oh, we can save $1 million here. So I like to ask the question, well, tell us over time, what is the downside of saving that $1 million now? Like, what will it cost us over the next 20, 30 years? And I can promise you that sometimes the picture is not very nice. Yeah? So doing a good job up front can save a ton of money down the road. Okay. Yeah? And I think there is a lot of dialogue what needs to happen here, because thinking short term when you make those kind of investment is not a good idea in my opinion. Yeah? Like to say, people buy the latest smartphones and the latest cars. Why? Because they want to have state-of-the-art technology to be more competitive. Yeah. But when it comes to much more capital-intense investments, then we look the other way around. Like, let's build a building state-of-the-art 10 years ago instead of building what is state-of-the-art now. Yeah?
And understanding that on the front end, when we start even going into site selection, right? You were talking about, Nate, it really drives that cost on the front end, right? I mean, if you buy a piece of land that you can't use 10 years from now, then what good does it do you in the long run? That cost is exponential down the line. Yeah.
Well, I think, tied back to the workforce conversation, when I started in this business 25 years ago, we didn't have HR in the kickoff meeting, right?
Right.
It was so far from...
You don't have to worry about the people.
Yeah, no. We're just building buildings.
Yeah, no, right, just building buildings.
But the problem now is that HR function has to be part of that conversation, because they're the ones that are not getting the resumes when they post a job. They're the ones that are interviewing people and then getting turned down and then asking, well, why don't you want to work for us? And they're the ones doing the exit interviews when you have a retention issue. Yeah. And a lot of times having that voice in the room to say, the people think the food sucks. There's no good break room, right?
It's dark.
It's dark.
Yeah.
They don't know if it's even sunny outside. Yeah. They can't see clouds. They can't see, they show up at work at 6 a.m. They leave at 5 p.m. and in the middle of the winter, majority of the country, that means you didn't see the sun, right? They eat their lunch at a folding table right on the line side, right? There's no cafeteria, and so. You have those conversations, and then that CEO, that CFO. I mean, they know, like a lot of folks, when you need to replace someone, it's either 6 to 12 months of their salary to replace them. So that's real numbers. That starts adding up. And if you have a building that doesn't say, like, I care about my people, that's the reputation that you have. Like, it's hard work. I'm grinding every day, and then I have to eat lunch in a folding chair next to a die-cast machine. And then I leave after the sun went down. Like, yippee, sign me up.
Yeah.
Especially, you know, when we look at Gen Z, Gen Alpha, you know, there's I think McKinsey's here. McKinsey had a study. It was like 15% of those generations feel like manufacturing is a job for them. Like, that has to change, right? You know, the conversation yesterday about how folks are still programmed like they need to go get a 4-year degree to get a good job, versus like I could go with a 2-year tech degree or right out of high school, be making good money on a manufacturing line. And some of these, you know, we like throwing the word advanced manufacturing because that helped clean it up.
It's all advanced.
It's all very advanced now. But you know, a truly advanced manufacturing facility where it's bright, and there's sunlight, and there's good amenities, like that's attracting folks. And the client he's talking about, you know, is in Mason, Ohio, when we worked on that project, and their retention rates are 97% in their new facility. Like, they post a job, they get stacks of resumes. They're not worrying about a workforce development because they created a stay place for the folks that they have.
Yeah.
Those are
The building sends a lot of signals, yeah, to your people, to your customers, to your community. So it's really representing you, yeah, and you need to think about what's the image you want to disclose, and how do we respect our customers, how do we respect our people. And as we know, if we respect our people, they love us and they stay around, they stick around.
If I can add one thing, so a lot of this is long-term, right? I'd be remiss from the construction side if I didn't talk about like just project specific, from a team building dynamic on a standard project, right? Design, bid, build. The only lever you get to pull as a team is change order owner, change order owner, change order owner, right? If you have a collaborative team and you have set up your contracts in a way that drives that collaboration, you've selected the right partners, you've gone through a thorough process in that selection. That lever is the last lever you pull. You pull a whole bunch of levers before you get to that point. You know, the question that you asked initially in the room is, how do we come together collectively with all the right people in the room and solve this problem? You know, you don't put your, like I don't go into the room and put my Miller Valentine hat on, right? You don't put your BHDP hat on. We go into the room and it's the project team and what's best for the project team. So, you know, a lot of long-term things come out of this, but short-term, just on a, excuse me, project by project basis, you're really driving that certainty in cost and schedule by making sure you're getting the right people in the room early on.
Yeah, and I think the benefit of that is when you have everyone together and everyone's collectively driving to that success criteria that we created at the beginning across the entire team, that's more than just safety, quality, schedule, and cost. Right. And there's all those more maybe qualitative type objectives. Like, you're not sacrificing those because we have to start yanking the change order lever, because collectively the whole team's pulling the rope in the same direction.
So, and you talked a little bit about building certainty early on with the integrated team. So do you have tools you can share, Kenneth, that you've used to get certainty early on around cost and certainty early on around schedule? Because we still do have the CFOs, right? It still does matter at the end of the day, not just the life of the facility, but the cost of the project and the timing for the project. So what tools have you used in the integrated setting to build certainty?
Yeah, absolutely. So we use Last Planner as our type of schedule to set that up in the front end. But I think really what's different is, you know, typically on a standard project, the architect or the general contractor, whoever's hired by the owner, or sometimes together, you create that schedule, and you create that schedule in a silo, and you are now telling people that they have to hit this schedule that they had no input on, right? So the thing that we do is we get those people in the room, and they have buy-in now to that schedule. They have input into that schedule. It's a lot more likely that you're going to hit a schedule that you create yourself than if somebody comes in the room and says you're going to do this, right? So schedule-wise, that's the best thing, is getting that buy-in and getting those people to actually provide input into that Last Planner. From a cost perspective, we do, you know, continuous estimating on the front end of these projects. What I mean by that is, you know, if Dan's coming into the room and saying, hey, what about X, Y, and Z from a design side, he might just be sketching that up on a napkin or on a blue beam session or something. He's not going through a full design before I can tell him, hey, this is going to cost $2 a square foot or $3 a square foot more on top of your overall cost. You start, you know, performing best value option analyses to drive decisions early on that impact cost without spending a whole lot of dollars on the front end to fully design something before we can make those decisions as a team. So those are probably the three biggest areas that we could really dive into the details on to provide that certainty very early on.
Yeah, I think a couple things, how that impacts us, and maybe scary for the owners. Tell us how much money you got.
Yep.
I'm sorry. Up front. Tell us your budget.
Yep.
Like it doesn't make, the job's gonna cost what it costs, right? If we know you have $100 and then, but you don't, if you never share that with us and we jump into programming, like we can either price the design or design to the price.
Right.
Right, those are two very different things, right? So you say up front how much money you have. I'm probably, I promise we're not going to try to get right up to it, right? Everything's open book.
It's all
when
open,
you're doing.
transparent. Yep.
It's all transparent, and we set that number. And as we move into programming and start understanding what the square footage is that we're planning, they're going too much. Like we haven't even really drawn anything. Right. And then you're breaking that out in all the different elements of the building, all the different areas. Like say you got clean rooms, those are $100 or $1,000 a foot. You got office space, that's $400 a foot. You got labs that are this much bucks. The manufacturing floor is this much bucks a foot. Like we could really quickly, as we move through very early programming, have some sanity checks about where the budget's hitting at. And before we even get to drawing, we're having those value added conversations about, okay, where there's portions here that we can squeeze. And it's not a comment that's being made at like a 50% drawing set or a 90% drawing set when they're getting like close to hard numbers, like, oh crap, we're 20% over budget.
Right.
Because that is much more expensive, much more intensive to make those changes when that ship's already sailing.
Right.
And from a schedule standpoint, when you do that schedule from right to left and get a true idea what the critical path is, that informs the design team, right? You put a big star on there. I need civil permit package on this date because that's on the critical path. And I need the structural steel package on this date, and that hits the critical path. And then we're able to tailor what we design and able to tailor, from our standpoint, making those decisions with the owner, like, hey, we need to lock down the site plan on this date because the civil needs 6 weeks to hit that permit package. But if that permit package isn't on the critical path, then we're not driving that. So then you understand, like, where's all the time need to be spent? Okay, back a year ago when a generator, maybe still do this to this day, generator takes 2 years. We need to figure out what the emergency load is like tomorrow,
right.
Because we need to order a generator, and that generator is going to be here in 24 months from now. And so like that all feeds into creating that certainty for the owner that they understand what the budget is. They understand what the schedule is.
And it helps guide the owner too, right? You mentioned a little bit there, right? The schedule is driven for us as partners, but it's important for us to understand too and put on that schedule, hey, we need a decision on this by this date, or now you're holding up the schedule. A lot of times you'll go into those meetings, OAC meetings, you're like, I need these 12 answers. But a lot of times we don't dig into the details of when do we need those answers by, right? And sometimes there's some feedback that goes back and forth between the team and the owner on helping them make that decision, to your point, Dan. So yeah, I think those are great drivers on that front.
So this week we have heard already great presentations about work scheduling and project management and the importance of all of that to control timelines and schedules. I like to involve early on also the financial team in phases of value engineering and those kind of discussions. Because coming back to that CapEx, OpEx discussion, I like to not look at value engineering isolated, but I like to look at value engineering in the context of total cost of ownership and life cycle costs. Mm-hmm. Yeah? Because it's easy to say, oh, if we cut that, we save $1 million now. Yeah? But what's the long-term impact? Mm-hmm. So having the finance team on board, having them understand their decisions or the impact of potential decisions is critical, yeah? And then having a good project cost monitoring over time, looking at not only the project budget, CapEx, but also OpEx impact, yeah? I think OpEx impact, in my opinion, is way too often underestimated. And then when you are the person running the operation, you deal with that for long, yeah? We made wrong choices, now I need to find smart ways to cut out energy costs, right, or emissions, or to make that place safe. We could have done it right in the first place.
And that's a great segue, Yannick. I wanted to talk a little bit more about that. So we've talked about how to assemble the right team, how to set the conditions of satisfaction right, which are not only like making sure that the whole team is focused on the project, but it's also a built-in accountability tool, right, as far as the project goes. But how do we make sure the building is best set up to serve the facility of the future? So if it costs you $1 to build today, we know it's going to cost you $10 to upfit and ultimately $100 to operate and maintain. So how do you make sure that that same team is focused on minimizing the $100 and making sure that you make the right investment when it's $1 to build it for the future?
Yeah. So we all know, and there are a lot of owners here, they are under fierce competition. Yeah, we are in a time and age of technology acceleration, so there is a tremendous pressure on innovation, on cost reduction, having competitive pricing, having very competitive time to market. So there is a tremendous pressure. I think everybody would agree with that. So I like to say that your building today is not like it was for long. The building housing your operation, the building is a key performance driver for operation. And I think this is a paradigm shift people need to realize, because it will help make the right decisions. As an operator, you are already planning your automation, your manufacturing automation, your logistics, automatics, warehousing, your AGVs and all of that to maximize your productivity. Yeah? So early on, when you are planning that building, you have the chance to do it right in thinking about the factory of the future. You mentioned talent and Gen Z. They don't want to work in a factory from 20 years ago. They want to work in the factory of the future. They want digitization. They want artificial intelligence. They want IoT. If you don't have that, they look at you like a dinosaur. You're a dinosaur. Why should I work for you? Mm-hmm. I don't want to spend my time with you. Yeah. I have a short life, so why should I do that? So we are looking these days for those kind of attributes. Yeah? And of course, the initial investment will be more expensive when you are looking at digital twins, when you are looking at how do we integrate upfront artificial intelligence. But your operating costs will be so competitive that you have a chance and an edge with your competitors because they're doing the same thing, and maybe they're smarter than you. So don't make the wrong choices early on. So I'm sure everybody in the room here is familiar with Industry 4.0. That's the fourth industrial revolution. This is all about data, about artificial intelligence, about automation, robotics. So this is just how the factories are built now, or the DCs, or the data centers, whatever it is. And all of that needs to be incorporated in the strategy. So build state-of-the-art buildings. It will do a lot of good for your operating costs. It will help you reach your ESG goals, which you will have anyhow, whatever administration is in place, because you get those corporate goals top-down. Yeah? It depends on your certifications. If you are ISO certified, you will have to every year come with new improvements on that. And if you have AI control, lighting, and HVACs, you can save 30% compared to not having it. If you have the metering installed early on, you can capture all those data from your operations automatically, and you don't need to hire people to go around the building and capture all the data points. It's waste. Yeah? So having that lean mindset combined with the automation technology mindset can really propel you. Yeah? I like to use the metaphor of a Formula One team. I'm a Formula One fan. Yeah. You cannot compete this year with even a car of last year. It doesn't work. Yeah? So you need to be state of the art. Yeah? And when we build today to operate for the next 10, 20 years before we do some major remodeling, well, if we don't invest in the technology of today, we are already starting from behind. Yeah?
Well, thank you very much for sharing best practices, all four of you. I think we need to allow a little bit of time for audience questions. We have about 10 minutes left. Any questions from the audience, or did you receive any? Okay. Yep.
We do have a couple of questions from the audience. I know. Hold on. There we go. First of all, have you considered tapping into the leadership of local building trades folks and bringing them to the, to early on to the planning as well? So, to what extent, since labor supply is number one, it used to be incentives. I remember those days. Where you'd go to Salt Lake City, 10 miles up to Box Elder, 10 miles out in the road, and then you expect all the craft to be there. It's no more. What role do our labor friends have in your early collaborative initiatives?
I personally know from my Toyota days when we were, I worked on the San Antonio project, the Tupelo, Mississippi project, and the Mazda Toyota project in Huntsville. Part of that conversation was creating a PLA, project labor agreement. And that project labor agreement was incentivizing the unions to step up because we knew it was going to be thousands and thousands of people to build this facility. And creating that agreement on, especially when you're in the Southeast, the construction workers, there's not as many construction workers as you need, right? So you need to bring people from in and out of town, and setting up what those requirements are, setting up what those benefits are, setting up what those pay scales are earlier on as the project's being site selected.
Yep.
You're having those conversations in DC to hopefully, when we do get the green light and jump in, right, there's a commitment there of providing the construction jobs on the site.
And I think that's part of that. I talked about bringing the local entities in, bringing the local community in, bringing in the regional, the economic development people. That's a part of that discussion. Make sure that you have that side kind of taken care of, and we have those people that can actually do it.
Yeah.
Super. You mentioned AI as being an important attraction to workers and contractors alike. What particular aspect of AI and technology are important? Elizabeth, you and I were having a brief discussion back in the office prior to your coming in here, and I was intrigued by the fact what kind of an AI person that you've hired, what kind of reverse mentoring they're doing, et cetera. Who wants to take that question? Elizabeth, you want to kick it off? Then I'd like to hear what, yeah.
Sure. So we were talking about, he asked me what I thought was the next best move for construction as far as technology. And I said, I'm 52 years old, so I'm absolutely the wrong person to ask, right? You really got to ask some of our new folks in our co-ops and all. But we did just make a hire, a head of technology hire, which is not something we'd had in the past. And it's really focused on how do we get bigger, better, faster, stronger, more efficient. And we're talking a lot about digital employees, right? We're talking a lot about, you called them, I think, digital twins, right? But talking about digital employees that can sort of read your data and compile your data and be able to answer customers faster, be able to get to the market faster, your ROM comes out faster, your comps come out faster. So that's where we're focused. I think I really am the wrong person, Greg, to talk to you about where that we're going to be able to plug that in. I would love for Dean to be here, maybe next year, so we can talk more about that. But I would like to understand, Yannick, from you, when you're talking about, the new workforce wants to use technology. It's their native language, right? They want to use AI and technology in their job every day.
And talk to us also about what a digital resource or a digital employee is. What does that even mean?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think there is the dimension of the employees want to work in a tech-rich environment, but also companies want and need to use and leverage technology to remain competitive. Yeah? So we all have today a lot of IT systems in our companies, ERP systems, PLM systems, MES systems. We are collecting a ton of data. Yeah? Using AI is just the next stage. Like, how can we give and infuse computing power, machine learning to all that data so that the artificial intelligence augments us to make better decisions?
How do you make it actionable, right? We
For
all have
example,
access to it.
We all have here, whether we are an industrial company or construction company, an engineering firm, years and years of data in our systems. And some of our employees are smart, so we always call them and say, how was that project again, and can you tell me? But it takes time to search and retrieve information. So now just imagine you have all your data connected with artificial intelligence, And like you do with ChatGPT, when you ask something online, 30 seconds later, you have checked your entire data history from 20 or 30 years of operating. You can make better decisions faster. You can be ready faster. And on the operating side, whether it's your supply chain optimization, whether it's your manufacturing optimization, we mentioned IIoT and how your devices are smart. They have a lot of information, they exchange information, they can provide you information. So when you want to minimize downtime or do predictive maintenance, well, you have all the data. Like today, your car tells you, hey, you're running low on pressure with your tire. Go or you need to go to the oil check. Yeah, all of that is possible today in your factory as well. So it's a mistake to not leverage technology because you cannot compete like everybody else using it. Yeah?
It's quick to roll out.
Yeah, go right ahead.
Elizabeth, you mentioned hiring Dean. Dean's been with us for 2 weeks, 2.5 weeks. I've already had a one-on-one with him, and we're already beta testing some of the stuff that we're talking about. Exactly what you're talking about, Yannick. So like a lot of the checks and balances that happen on a day in, day out basis that you need to check on a job site, we don't have to check that anymore. I get a notification if something seems off. I don't have to go through and waste an hour or 2 hours of my day trying to check behind all these people that need to be doing X, Y, and Z. I just get a notification if it's not done. So stuff like that's very easy to integrate day one.
I also think, Yannick, we've been talking a lot about workforce and just the lack of workforce. AI and productivity is, you have to have it because you're not going to find all the people to do the job. I mean, that's a reality. It's a reality in the economic development business. You can want to hire these people, but you may not be able to do it. So you have to have AI and to drive productivity gains even further than we've done for the last 30 years.
Great point. Let's take one from the audience. Gracie.
Hi, it's Rob Wagner, Procter & Gamble, owner, okay? So one of the things is I want to go and talk about, actually a two-pronged question. You mentioned right team, and then the second question one time was right scope. So right team, just as my experience has been, often the A team will show up to do the bidding from the contractor, do everything for us, tell us we're going to do this, and then when it comes to execution, the C team shows up. Totally different people. Okay, so I'm not saying I've worked a lot with Miller Valentine. This is not an accusation by any means, but just other projects have done that. So it's like, what is the right team kind of thing? And I realize there's a shortage of individuals and stuff, and you have multiple teams, but then have the right team show up. As an owner, I would appreciate that much more than going to the site and seeing nobody I know.
Yeah, right.
Again, I never negotiated with you. I never did any of that. So that's one. And I don't know if you have a solution or if there's something you could respond to on that. The second question is right scope. You talk about investing for the future. Everything that I've ever done in the company for 35 years at P&G, if I build for tomorrow, we tear it out and throw it away when we build tomorrow. So it's a total waste of money. That's been my experience. Albany, we built for AC5, had to tear it all out when we put AC5 in. All of the building, everything. So we built it 5 years ago. Yes, we paid $1, but now we tore it out at $40 an hour or whatever, 40 kind of thing. So it's like, you have to balance that as to how you get that right scope. And so I think the collaboration is perfect. We need to talk about that. We need to understand that, I feel. But anyway, so that's just a counter to what you're saying is what I want to share.
I think the right scope's not necessarily overbuilding. Sometimes the right scope is understanding that I need to be flexible today for what's going to come down the line, and not designing yourself into a corner to where, we don't have a crystal ball, like mine broke years ago. So just being as flexible as possible as we move towards the future. But I think right scope also is part of that is, what we are building today, making sure it's built right, and from an operational standpoint, from a workforce development standpoint, from an attraction standpoint, like what we're building today is. But I think the right scope conversation I think part of that is not overbuilding, right? Understand what I need on year one and build for that, because I don't know what year 10 looks like, and then maybe you're not building a 200,000 extra square feet, you're building what you need today, and the project budget comes down, and what you actually build is a worthwhile product versus overbuilding and then just having more of crap.
And I think, well, growing up, what people always tell me is if you plan for the future and the future changes, okay, you can adjust your plan. But if you have no plan, then you can't even move forward, right? So you got to start with something, to your point. Now what we try to do is build for flexibility, like Dan's saying, not necessarily put things in place that are going to have to be torn out in the future. But if you want to put a second floor in the future, we probably want to go ahead and put the second floor in now, because doing that in the future is going to be cost prohibitive, right? So try and be flexible and understand the long-term needs, but understand that there needs to be flexibility for pivoting in the future. As far as the first part of that question goes, right, we try when we select these teams to interview the people, and I was talking to somebody about this yesterday, interview the teams that are actually going to be on the project, to your point, right? I don't want to interview the Elizabeths of the company, right? I want to talk to the person that's going to be sitting in the room with me when we are having the difficult conversations. Yeah, so that's what we try to hold them accountable to that, and a lot of times contractually we'll put together an exhibit that notes, hey, these are the key players on this project, and if you want to remove or replace this key player, it has to be approved by the team in advance, and we need to go through maybe another interview process or something internal to your team, but we try to hold people accountable to that.
I was an owner for 17 years. The whole bait and switch after the bid is a personal pet peeve of mine. So
it's awful, right? I mean, but for us, right, we want to build repeat customers. That's the most important thing for us, and we don't do that by doing the bait and switch, and it doesn't work like it used to anymore, right? People catch on quick.
Want to react quickly on the scoping question. I think you're absolutely right, and for me, P&G is one of those companies doing everything right when they build buildings and adopt technology. I want to clarify that on the technology adoption side, you have a kind of a bell curve, and you have those early adopters which are really experimenting with technology. Like, that's not something we would recommend to go with humanoid robots, so those kind of things which are really in early stage and having all those early stage problems. When I talk about state-of-the-art technology in automation, IoT, these are things which are proven. They work for 5-10 years. The early adopters and all that misconception has been sorted out, and now it's just state-of-the-art technology. I remember 2 years ago, I was working with a company in New Jersey. They were running big warehouses, and they wanted to improve their lean efficiency. And going into the warehouse, I realized, oh wow, that's a warehouse like you would operate 20, 30 years ago. They had zero technology. Yeah? So people were working millions of miles a day just around, and this was such a waste. So just doing some education of what can warehouse automation, for example, do for you, and showing that this has been around for 30 years, has been adopted hundreds of thousands of times. It's proven technology. Might be new for you, but it's not new for the world. So I fully appreciate your comment. Very important, scoping. Never go on the experimentation side. This is dangerous, will cost a lot of money. But know what's state of the art and adopt that.
Let's take one from the audience. Rana?
Hi, Cynthia Tsao, and I do lean high-performing team in IPD coaching. And I have found that on a lot of these projects, one of the biggest challenges is the continuous estimating portion. The reason why is seasoned estimators have pride in doing a really thorough estimate. But we don't have time for that. We need ROMs, rough orders of magnitude. How do you guys deal with that challenge? And in fact, I think we almost have to retrain people to achieve this ability that we really need on our projects.
Yeah, on our side, retraining is one way of doing it, right? I think aligning expectations is probably the most important thing on the front end, especially if you have folks that are new to the process. And we try to pair people, at least internal to Miller Valentine, even on our teams when we put our teams together, folks that have experience with IPD and then folks who don't, right? So that we can have some cross-training there. On a very recent project, we experienced this. We had an estimator in our company who's been with us for 25 plus years, and he wants it to the very, very minute detail, but we have 30% drawings. So how are we even going to get there and make that work, right? So then it's really having those discussions on the front end. Hey, I need to be plus or minus 20%, or I need to be plus or minus 50%, or I need to be plus or minus 10% at the different stages of the process. And then making sure that we understand, hey, what's the design intent right? If I'm just marking something up on a drawing and showing it to Dan and he's saying, yep, that looks good, making sure we understand what the intent of that detail is, because the nuances are going to be ironed out way down the line after we've already agreed to a price, right?
Yeah, and I think to that point, that can really derail a project, right? If you have that like old school pre-con estimator that does hard bid estimating and design bid build format his entire career, and then they're set into this IPD project where literally like every Friday I want to see what the new number is.
Right.
It's like, well, you didn't really change any drawings. Like, yeah, but I have a Revit file. Like, you have access to that. Like, tell me on Friday. But the other thing is, if they are not familiar with that style, they're most likely adding in contingencies.
Yep.
And then the owner's like, oh my God, like this is 30, 40% over budget. And we're just going like, I really don't think it is. But then you're looking at the number. And then that can be really bad, right? Because you start moving
making decisions
forward, making decisions on squeezing the scope,
Right.
and then you get to the actual final like GMP or whatever, and you're 20% under budget, and everyone's going, "Ooh,
We could have done a lot more, yeah.
Yeah, we could have done a lot more."
Yeah, I think it takes a guiding hand for sure, and somebody with some experience and understanding that, you know, it may feel like you're shooting from the hip sometimes, but you're really not. It's based on some level of cost history or some level of cost from a subcontractor or partner. Right?
We're going to take a couple extra minutes on this simply because we do have some wiggle room built into our schedules, so nobody who is subsequent to these presentations will be robbed at all. But I do want to get your question right here. Yes, go ahead.
Good morning, Daryl Thornton.
Sorry, I couldn't see you until you stood up. Go ahead.
Daryl Thornton with Great Core, so thank you, wonderful panel. You mentioned picking the right team. So we've had the pleasure of losing a job that we were low bid on and winning a job against 4 or 5 other bidders where we were high. Right. So my question to you is, how do you feel about using an evaluation matrix that uses weighted values based on not price being one of the lower weights, right? Schedule, execution plan, proposed, as Rob mentioned, proposed team. Safety, all those values in making your decision on that team. And thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the question. We use a matrix in our selection process. It normally has 12 to 15 questions. They are weighted. Some of them are, cost and schedule that are the ones that everyone looks for, but some of it is travel to the job site. Do you have the appropriate staffing? Can you meet the time frame of the project, right? Not duration, because we haven't started talking schedule yet, but just understanding like, hey, do you have capacity in, May, June, July type deal, as well as we always conduct an interview as well, and the interview is a portion of that weighted score, and then it'll tell you right at the end who scored the highest, and as long as that aligns with what everyone in the room that's making that selection feels is correct, then that's what we move forward with. And I'll tell you from our experience, 9 times out of 10 it is not the lowest bidder. A lot of times when you go through that process, you'll be surprised at the end of it who is being selected, but those weights are normally applied as a team, with the owner's input as well as what's most important to them in that selection process.
I think that's a wonderful question, and I think it's the only right way to do it this way. Selecting partner is a really important due diligence, so you want to look not at just a few dimensions, but as many dimensions as possible, looking at track records. And I think one of the most important things when you're on the buying side as an owner, you want predictability. Yeah, you don't want to spend millions of dollars and having a non-predictable outcome. So you want predictability, and you can minimize your risk in doing exactly those multidimensional assessments.
Yeah, the IPD delivery method, right, is kind of taken from the public sector, like public universities, where budget's not even part of the evaluation. It's all qualification, right? The entire bid sheet is about who is the best team. So, like the IPD projects that Miller Valentine and BHDP do with Procter & Gamble, like we don't talk about budget in the entire RFP process. They're selecting a team based off of who they think is the best one to do it. And then after, as we're awarded the job, there's like, all right, you got $100 to do this. You said you could do it in 18 months. Like, let's go. And then everything's open book, and we're obviously all driving to get under that budget. Collectively as a team, all pulling the rope in the same directions, not everyone in their own little kingdom with their own little contract and protecting my profit, protecting my line item. But you know, when it's all collectively and you remove that money conversation from the selection process, you really do have an opportunity to kind of bring your best team. Don't worry about, you know, potentially, well, I can't put all these heavy hitters on here because then I'm going to be high, and get that out of the conversation.
So there's often contention between the procurement groups at owner organizations who are trying to get the absolute lowest price. Managed service providers is a reverse auction where they've almost commoditized the resources. How do you weigh in on that contention between procurement, who's absolutely laser focused on getting the lowest price, but what does that compromise at times? Elizabeth, you want to kick us off on that one?
I'm happy to kick us off. I just had this experience, actually, with a group that was really focused on price, but the fact is they had engaged Miller Valentine from the beginning because of their quality expectation and their quality requirements. And these were some quality requirements that we don't see very often. It was extraordinary. And so, but then at the end, they wanted to negotiate price, and I sort of had to remind them, like, you hired us because we're a quality builder, right? You can rely upon us. Everything we do is going to be predictable, and that does come at a certain cost, right? We're not trading on being the low price provider. We're trading on expertise. We're trading on predictability, reliability, and safety. And so but price matters. It matters to everybody in the room, right? So you can't just completely dismiss with it. It matters.
That's right.
Right, so you just have to, I think you just have to assign the right value. And we're very transparent, right? So from the get-go, any client of ours understands where we are with regard to price, how it's going to be looked at is completely open book. So it's never a surprise, but you do pay for that value. And I think Kenneth said earlier, you know, if you're not going to look at qualifications and you're going to make the decision based on price, or purchasing is so focused on the cost of it, there will be compromises. Mm-hmm. They might be around quality. They should never be around safety. They might be around duration. They might be around schedule and speed to market. So it's a constant conversation. And the way we always approach it is just to be completely open book right out of the gate. Mm-hmm. This is what it costs. This is what it looks like. This is the team it takes to produce this.
Any other commentary?
I think it's important to have a mutual due diligence at the end. Yeah, are we the right partners? If somebody is shopping on price and somebody is offering value, maybe they are not the right fit to work together. So both parties need to discover each other and establish quickly, are we on the same page? If yes, then let's move forward, and then it can be a great partnership.
And that's why that transparency is so critical right out of the gate.
And you mentioned, Yannick, about predictability, right? That's what the owner is really looking for. A lot of times when you go with a low bidder, I'm sure everyone in the room that's an owner has seen it before, low bidder becomes change order, change order, change order.
They missed something.
That wasn't on the drawings explicitly, right? On the collaboration side, you know, you make assumptions that are based on criteria that you're based on your experience, right? And you're trying to get them what the overall project's going to cost. On a lump sum or design bid build, I'm just bidding what's on the drawings. So if it's not on the drawings, it's not in my price, right? And then it becomes a very tough battle to the end. And maybe they're a low bidder in the beginning, but do you end up ultimately paying the price in the long run?
Yeah, and I think that's the conversation with procurement is having that predictability, and it requires some faith from the owner, right, to say how much money you actually have, right? It's not comfortable. Right? I never did it when I was Toyota. I'm not going to tell you how much is in my ring. I'm never going to do that. But when the owner kind of has that faith in the team, I selected you on qualifications. I selected you because I know you're the best team to pull off this job. All right, I keep going to $100. I got $100. You guys figure out how to pull this off because I hired experts to do that for me. And that's the blessing from the procurement side. It's we're hiring a team that can deliver based off how qualified they are to do it.
Final comment?
And go for trusted partnerships. Yeah, if you have discovered the team what doesn't let you down and they stick to the promise and you have had successes together, so why disrupt? Go with trusted partnership. This will go extremely well in the long run.
Yep. Terrific. Let's give it up for Elizabeth and her panel. Terrific insight. We appreciate it. Thank you so much.